Welcome, dreamer. I'm going to be reading a bedtime story from this book, Journey Through Bookland. This book has a copyright of 1909. And we're going to do this while we have a fireplace going, as you can hear, and the rain in the background. Great time for a story, if you ask me. Here's a good one for any time of year, not just Christmas time, but this is Hans Christian Andersen. This one's called The Fir Tree. Out in the forest stood a little fir tree. It had a good place and could have sunlight, air, and there was in plenty, and all around grew many larger comrades, pines as well as firs. But the little fir tree wished ardently to become greater. It did not care for the warm sun and fresh air. It took no notice of the peasant children who went about talking together when they had come out to look for strawberries and raspberries. The children often came with a whole basket full, or with a string of berries, which they had strung on a straw. Then they would sit down by the little fir tree and say, "How pretty and small this one is." The fir tree did not like that at all. Next year, he had grown bigger, and the following year, he was taller still. "Oh, if I were only as tall as the others," sighed the fir tree. "Then I would spread my branches far around and look out from my crown into the wide world. The birds would then build nests in my boughs, and when the wind blew, I would nod grandly. It took no pleasure in the sunshine, in the birds, or in the red clouds that went sailing over in the morning and evening." Here's a picture. Here's the fir tree. There's a bird there. We haven't gotten there yet. Is that a face on the fir tree? Kind of interesting. It just has just the eyes. Interesting. When it was winter and the snow lay all around, white and sparkling, a hare would often come jumping along and spring right over the little fir tree. Oh, that made him so angry. But 2 winters went by, and when the third came, the little tree had grown so tall that the hare was obliged to run around it. "Oh, to grow, and become old, that's the only fine thing in the world," thought the tree. Man, that's not what I thought when I turned 41, I tell you what. But when you're young, you want to be grown up, right? And I feel like some people, when they're old, they want to be young again. Let me tell you something. You, yes, you, I'm talking to you. You are the perfect age. You are the right age for what you are. You're normal aged. Anyway, I digress. In the autumn, the woodcutters always came and felled a few of the largest trees. That was done this year, too, and the little fir tree that now was quite well known shuddered with fear. For the stately trees fell to the ground with a crash, and their branches were cut off, so that the trees looked quite naked, long and slender, and could hardly be recognized. Then they were laid upon wagons, and the horses dragged them away out of the wood. Where were they going? What destiny awaited them? In the spring, when the swallows and the stork came, the tree asked them, "Do you know where the big firs were taken? Did you meet them?" The swallows knew nothing about it, but the stork looked thoughtful, nodded his head, and said, "Yes, I think so. I met many new ships when I flew out of Egypt. On the ships were tall masts. I fancy these were the trees. They smelt like fir. I can assure you they're stately, very sturdy." And there's the stork right there. See them? And then there's the swallows, right? The swallows were like, "Psh, bro, I don't know what's going on with them trees. I'm just a bird. What do you think?" And then the tree said, "Hey man, stork, do you know what's going on?" And then the stork said, "Holy moly, a talking tree." Or something. I wasn't paying attention to the story. Moving on. "Oh, that I were big enough to go over the sea. What kind of a thing is this sea, and how does it look?" "It would take a long to explain all that," said the stork, and he went away. "Rejoice in thy youth," said the sea beams. "Rejoice in thy fresh growth, in the young life that is within thee." And the wind kissed the tree, and the dew wept tears upon it, but the fir tree did not understand. When Christmas time approached, quite young trees were felled. Sometimes trees which were neither so old nor so large as this fir tree, that ever rested, but always wanted to go away. These beautiful young trees kept all their branches. They were put upon wagons and horses, and horses dragged them away out of the wood. "Where are they all going?" asked the fir tree. "They are not greater than I, indeed. One of them is much smaller. Why do they keep all their branches? Whither are they taken?" We know that, chirped the sparrows. "Okay, now they got something to say. All right, fine. Yonder in the town we looked at all the windows. We know where the fir trees go. We have looked at the windows, and we have seen that they are planted in the middle of a warm room, and dressed up in the greatest splendor with the most beautiful things: gilt apples, honey cakes, playthings, and many hundreds of candles." Hold on. Do you guys recognize what they're talking about? Maybe something like this. ornament on the tree. This is literally an ornament from my literal childhood. Or maybe the playthings like this. They used to put presents on the tree, not just under the tree, little toys, And instead of electric lights, they would literally put little candles on the branches. I agree this is not very safe to do, but they did it anyway, and they did their best to make it safe. Let's move on with this. Wow. And then, asked the fir tree, trembling through all its branches. And then, what happens then? Why, we have not seen anything more, but it is wonderful. Perhaps I may be destined to this glorious end one day, cried the fir tree rejoicing. That is even better than traveling across the sea. Oh, how I long for it. If it were only Christmas. Now I am great and grown up like the rest who were led away last year. Oh, if I were only on the wagon. If I were only in the warm room amidst all the pomp and splendor. And then, yes, then something even better will come, something far more charming, else why should they adorn me so? There must be something grander, something greater still to come, but what? Oh, I'm suffering, I'm longing, I don't know myself. What is the matter with me? Rejoice in us, said air and sunshine. Rejoice in thy fresh youth here in the woodland. The fir tree did not rejoice at all, but it grew and grew winter and summer. It stood there, green, dark green. The people who saw it said, "What a handsome tree!" And at Christmas time it was felled before any of the others. The axe cut deep into its marrow, and the tree fell to the ground with a sigh. It fell to pain, a sensation of the faintest. It could not think at all of happiness, for it was sad at parting from its home. From the place where it had grown up, it knew that it should never again see the dear old companions, the little bushes and the flowers all around, perhaps not even the birds. The tree came to itself only when it was unloaded in a yard with other trees, and heard a man say, "This one is famous. We want only this one." For some reason he has a southern accent. I don't know, maybe they're in Texas. Now 2 servants came in gay liveries and carried the fir tree into a large, beautiful room. All around the walls hung pictures, and by the great stove stood large Chinese vases with lions on covers. There were rocking chairs, silken sofas, great tables covered with picture books, and toys worth 100 times $100, at least, the children said so. And the fir tree was put into a great tub filled with sand, but no one could see that it was a tub, for it was hung around with a green cloth and stood on a large many-colored carpet. Oh, how the tree trembled! What was to happen now? The servants and the young ladies also decked it out. On one branch they hung little bags cut out of colored paper, and every bag was filled with sweetmeats. Golden apples and walnuts hung down as if they grew there. And more than 100 little candles, red, white, and blue, were fastened to different boughs. Dolls that looked exactly like real people. The tree had never seen such before. Swung among the foliage, and high on the summit of the tree was fixed a tinsel star. It was splendid. "This evening," said all, "this evening it will shine." Oh, thought the tree, that it were evening already. Oh, that the lights may be soon lit. When will that be done? I wonder if trees will come out of the forest to look at me. Will the sparrows fly against the panes? Shall I grow fast here, and stand adorned in summer and winter? But the tree had a backache from mere longing, and the backache is just as bad for a tree as the headache for a person. At last the candles were lighted. What a brilliance, what a splendor! The tree trembled so in all its branches that one of the candles set fire to a green twig, and it was scorched. But one of the young ladies hastily put the fire out. Now the tree might not even tremble. Oh, that was terrible. It was so afraid of setting fire to some of its ornaments. It was quite bewildered with all the brilliance. And now the folding doors were thrown open. And a number of children rushed in as if they would have overturned the whole tree, while the older ones stood quite silent, but only for a minute. Then they shouted till the room rang. They then danced gleefully round the room. One present after another was plucked from it. "What are they all about?" said the tree. What's going to be done? And the candles burned down to the twigs, and as they burned down, they were extinguished. And then the children were given permission to plunder the tree. They rushed upon it, so that every branch cracked again, and if it had not been fastened to the top and by a golden star to the ceiling, the tree certainly would have fallen down. The children danced about with their pretty toys. No one looked at the tree except one old man, who came up and peeped among the branches, but only to see if a fig or an apple had not been forgotten. Here's the old man sitting by the tree. Imagine if you were a tree and all the stuff that happened at Christmas and all the stuff that happened around the Christmas tree. If from the tree's perspective, boy, if only to see a fig if an apple had been forgotten, because the kids had already plundered it for all of the treats. A story, a story, a story, shouted the children as they drew a little fat man towards the tree. He sat down just beneath it. For then we shall be in the green wood, said he, and the tree may have the advantage of listening to my tale. But I can tell only one. Will you hear the story of Ivede Avede, or of Clumpy Dumpy, who fell downstairs and is still raised up to honor and married the princess? Ivede Avede, cried some. Clumpy Dumpy, cried others. And you pronounced it wrong, narrator, said others still. They didn't say that, but I probably said it wrong. Only the fir tree was silent, and thought, shall I not be in it? Shall I have nothing to do in it? But he had been in the evening's amusement, and had done what was required of him. And the fat man told about Clumpy Dumpy, who fell downstairs, and yet was raised to honor and married the princess. And the children clapped their hands and cried, tell another, tell another. For they wanted to hear about Ivede Avede, but they got only the story of Clumpy Dumpy. Boy, sure I'm glad they told me that detail of the story. Sure is important. The fir tree stood quite silent and thoughtful. Never had the birds in the wood told such a story as that. Clumpy Dumpy fell downstairs and yet came to honor and married the princess. Yes, so it happens in the world, thought the fir tree, and believed it must be true, because that was such a nice man who told it. And you can tell, because look at him right there. Oh, you can even see like a little horsey, or some sort of toy there. Look at this lady right there. What's she doing? Putting hands on her hips. She said, man, what are you doing telling that story, old man, about that Clumpy freaking Dumpy? What are you doing? Well, who can know? Perhaps I shall fall downstairs too and marry a princess. And it looked forward with pleasure to being adorned again the next evening with candles and toys and gold and fruit. Tomorrow I shall not tremble, it thought. I shall rejoice in all my splendor. Tomorrow I shall hear the story of Clumpy Dumpy again, and perhaps of Ivede Avede too. And the tree stood all night, quiet and thoughtful. In the morning the servants and the chambermaids came in. Now my splendor will begin afresh, thought the tree. But they dragged him out of the room and upstairs to the garden, and there they put him in a dark corner with no daylight shone. Hold on. What's the meaning of this? I to do here? What is to happen? And he leaned against the wall and thought and thought. And he had time enough, for days and nights went by, and nobody came up. And when at length someone came, it was only to put some great boxes in a corner. Now the tree stood quite hidden away, and the supposition is that it was quite forgotten. Now it's winter outside, thought the tree. The earth is hard and covered with snow, and people cannot plant me. Therefore, I suppose I'm to be sheltered here until spring comes. Until spring comes, how considerate. How good people are. If it were only not so dark in here and so terribly solitary. Not even a little hare, a little rabbit. It was pretty out there in the wood when the snow laid thick and the hare sprang past. Yes, even when he jumped over me. But then I did not like it. It is terribly lonely up here. Peep, peep, said the little mouse, and crept forward. And then came another little one. They smelt at the fir tree, and then slipped among the branches. It's horribly cold, said the two little mice, or else it would be comfortable here. Don't you think so, you old fir tree? Oh, I'm not that old at all, said the fir tree. There are many much older than I. Where did you come from? Asked the mice. And what did you know? They were dreadfully inquisitive. Tell us about the most beautiful spot on the earth. Have you been there? Have you been to the in the storeroom where the cheeses lie on the shelves and the hams hang from the ceiling, where one dances on tallow candles and goes in thin and comes out fat? I don't know that, replied the tree. But I know the wood, where the sun shines and the birds sing. And then it told all about its youth. And the little mice had never heard anything of the kind, and they listened and said, What a number of things you have seen! How happy you must have been! I, replied the fir tree, and it thought about what it had told. Yes, those were really quite happy times. But even he told of the Christmas Eve, when he had been hung with sweetmeats and candles. Oh, said the little mice, how happy you have been, you old fir tree. I'm not that old, said the tree. I came out of the wood only this winter. I'm only rather backwards in my growth. What splendid stories you can tell, said the little mice. And the next night they came with 4 other little mice to hear that the tree had to relate. And the more it said, the more clearly it did remember everything, and thought, those were quite merry days. But they may come again. They may come again. Clumpy Dumpy fell downstairs, and yet he married a princess. Perhaps I may marry a princess too. And then the fir tree thought of a pretty little birch tree that had grew out in the forest. For the fir tree, that birch was a real princess. "Who's Clumpy Dumpy?" asked the little mice. And the fir tree told the whole story. It could remember every single word, and the little mice were ready to leap to the very top of the tree with pleasure. Next night, a great many more mice came, and on Sunday 2 rats even appeared. But these thought the story was not pretty, and the little mice were sorry for that. For now, they also did not like it so much anymore. "Do you only know one story?" said the rats. "Only that one," replied the tree. "I heard that on the happiest evening of my life. I did not think how happy it was." "That's a very miserable story. Don't you know about bacon and tallow candles, a storeroom story?" "No," replied the tree, "and would rather not hear you," said the rats. And they went back to their own people, the little mice at last, who stayed away, and then the tree sighed and said, "It was very nice when they sat around me, the little merry little mice, and I listened, and they listened when I spoke to them. Now that's the past too, but I shall remember to be pleased when they take me out." But when did that happen? Why, it was one morning that people came and rummaged in the garret. The boxes were put away and the tree was brought out. They certainly threw him rather roughly on the floor, but a servant dragged him away at once to the stairs where the daylight shone. "Now life is beginning again," thought the tree. It felt the fresh air and the first sea beams. And then it was out in the courtyard. Everything passed so quickly that the tree quite forgot to look at itself. There was so much to look at all around. The courtyard was close to a garden, and there everything was blooming. The roses hung fresh and fragrant over the little paling. The linen trees were in blossom, and swallows cried, "Quizit, quizit, my husband's home." But it was not the fir tree they meant. "Now I shall live," cried the tree, rejoicingly, and spread its branches far out. But alas, they were all withered and yellow, and it lay in the corner among nettles and weeds. The tinsel star was still upon it, and shone in the bright sunlight. In the courtyard, a couple of the merry children were playing, who had danced round the tree at Christmas time, and had rejoiced over it. One of the youngest ran up and tore off the golden star. "Look, what is sticking to that ugly old fir tree?" said the child. And he trod on the branches till they cracked under his boots. And the tree looked at the blooming flowers and the splendor of the garden, then looked at itself and wished it had remained in the dark corner of the garret. It thought of its fresh youth in the wood, of the merry Christmas Eve, and of the little mice which had listened so pleasantly to the story of Klumpy Dumpy. Past, past, said the old tree, had I but rejoiced when I could have done so. Past, past. And the servants came and chopped the tree into little pieces, and a whole bundle lay there. It blazed brightly under the great brewing copper, and it sighed deeply. Each sigh it was like a little shot, and the children who were at play there ran up, seated themselves by the fire, looked into it, and cried, puff, puff. But at each explosion, which was a deep sigh, the tree thought of a summer day in the woods, or of a winter night there when the stars beamed. He thought of Christmas Eve, and of Klumpy Dumpy, the only story he had ever heard or knew how to tell. And thus the tree burned, much like you here in the fireplace now. The boys played in the garden, and the youngest had on his breast a golden star which the tree had worn on its happiest evening. Now that was past, and the tree's life was past, and the story is past too. Past, past, and that's the way with all stories. That's the way with all stories. Past, past, past. What a jolly tale. Not. It's a tragedy, but this is Hans Christian Andersen right there. And there's a little blurb right here telling how sad he must have been on Christmas for telling such a story. But look, I get it. If we can learn anything from this story, what do you think it is? If I were to guess, I would say what I felt, especially me in my age, 41 years. I remember the way I felt when I was a kid, especially at Christmas. I would look at the presents, and I would look at the things, and I thought, wow, this is the best day ever here. And or I would look at the kids across the street. Boy, man, their tree is bigger. Their presents are more grand. How should I be? Wouldn't it be great if I could be like them? Or, oh man, I hate being young. I want to be old and do all the fun things that the adults get to do. I didn't appreciate my youth, did I? And I guess you really can't know for sure until you experience it, much like the tree did. But if there's one thing that comforts me, even though the story is the past, even though the tree is the past, even though this star and was wearing it and said, oh, well, now I'm going to have fun with this. Everything is like that. Just as stories are the past stories are today's moments where we get to share these memories. Tell those stories to those who weren't there. Learn more stories. And read old stories from folks like Hans Christian Andersen. What a great story. Thank you for spending time with me. I appreciate it. And now, I wish you a very Merry Christmas and pleasant dreams.